Hey everybody, welcome back to another very exciting Adobe Live. I'll be your host and presenter, Jesús Ramirez. How's it going? Thank you much for joining me today. Please let me know where you're tuning in from. I'm recording or streaming from the beautiful San Francisco Bay Area in Morgan Hill, California. I see Nicholas in the chat from Sweden. Thank you so much. Hey CJ, how's it going? Good morning. Thank you for joining me. And Paco, hey Paco, how's it going? So yeah, this stream is going to be all about advanced Photoshop techniques that I think you should know. So hopefully they can help you out in your workflow. As you know, if you've watched my streams before, I talk fast. I have a lot to cover. I usually have more than an hour's worth of content, and I try to give you as much value as possible. So if you're enjoying anything that I'm showing you guys, please let me know in the comments and also share it with a friend. I'm sure people would also be interested in learning some of this content. So we're going to jump right into it. So this is my screen here. You should be able to see it in just a moment. And it is this beautiful dog, and he is riding in this car. So what we're going to do is do what appears to be a very simple masking out of the dog and put him into a different background. But there's some interesting challenges in this image, and I want to show you how I will tackle some of those challenges. So to start, we're going to just go the easy way and use artificial intelligence to remove the background from the photo. So I always like to use these automated tools and get me 80% of the way there, and then fine tune that extra 20% manually. And I figure that that's usually how I get the best results. So in the brand new taskbar here at the bottom, if you don't see that, you can go into Window and select the contextual taskbar. That'll give you access to the Remove Background button. By the way, if you're watching in an older version of Photoshop, you don't need this taskbar. You can go into the Properties panel here and click on Remove Background. Same thing, but I prefer the taskbar. So I'm going to click on Remove Background. And as I said, this will use AI to try to figure out what is in the image and then select the main subject and apply a layer mask to that. And as you can see, the job is not perfect, but it's pretty good. I'm going to disable this layer for now just so that we could see what we have here. And if you hold Shift and click on the layer mask thumbnail, you'll get this red X over the thumbnail, and it will bring back the original image. This is just saying that the layer mask is no longer active and we're looking at the original image. And what I want to do now is bring back some of the areas that the remove background feature that it catches is really the car. So how do we bring that back? There's a lot of ways of doing it. You can definitely select the brush tool and paint on the layer mask with white to reveal in a layer mask. White reveals and black conceals. Different shades of gray give you varying levels of transparency. So you can definitely paint, but since the car has very smooth edges, I think I'm going to use a vector to select that and turn that into a selection and fill it with white to reveal. I know that sounds crazy, but it's actually not that difficult. From the toolbar, I'm going to enable the curvature pen tool, and I'm just going to create a selection that looks like this. And it's not perfect at all. I just want to just start with the selection, and then I'll try to adjust this so it matches the edges. So one thing I'll do is double click on this point here to create that straight edge. You see how now there's a straight edge there, and I can move this one here. If need be, I can click in the middle and give it more of a round curvature if that's what I need. By the way, in this example, one of the challenges is the shallow depth of field. The edges are very blurry and they're not sharp. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in a few pixels inside of the edge, because we're going to blur the selection later and I need that extra room and I don't want to get the blue sky. Then I'm going to come down here and make adjustments to this side. And again, I'll create another point here just so that it's inside the edge of the car. And I think I was a little heavy-handed here at the bottom, so I'm just going to double click and move that away. You can also move the taskbar out of the way if it's bothering you. Okay, here we are. This looks really, really good. Now, what I'm going to do is simply right-click on that path and choose Make Selection. It's going to ask me if I want to make a feather. I don't want to feather it. Feather it simply means blurred. Like, do I want a blurred edge? I definitely do not. Sharp is fine. I'll press OK. And there it is. Now I can enable my mask simply by clicking on it. I can fill with white. White is my foreground color, so I'll fill with it by pressing Alt and Backspace on Windows, Option Delete on the Mac, and I can deselect. By the way, I'm so used to deselecting by using the keyboard shortcut Control-D, Command-D, but now there's this cool little button here that you can just click on and it'll deselect. Completely up to you. Let me just look at the chat to see if we have any questions. We have Z by HP Tech, or Rick from Massachusetts. How's it going? Robert, thank you so much, everybody. Sean, good to see you in the chat. Cool. Yeah, no questions yet. That's awesome. All right. So now that I've made that straight edge, I need to blur it. Remember, the original edge has this shallow depth of field, and I want to match that. And the way that I'm going to match it is by selecting the lasso tool, which allows me to freehand the selection. So I'm just going to freehand a selection around that edge and right up here as well. And it looks like I missed this part here. We'll worry about that later. What I'm going to do now is going to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and now I'm blurring the filter. So I can just, blurring the mask with this filter, and I can just adjust the slider accordingly until I get a blur that works for my image. Before I actually blur it, I'm going to bring back the background so that I could see what that edge is going to look like up against my background. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I can blur it. That's too much. And this is why I gave myself that extra room so that the blur wouldn't catch the original background. So I was still within the edges of the car. And I think somewhere around 6 and maybe 4 pixels or so will work. So, I'll split the difference and we'll say 5.6 or so. I'll press OK, deselect, and that is my result. Now, let me just fix this corner here. I'll fill with white. Again, white is my foreground color. Alt and backspace. The next step is a little bit more challenging. Whoops. So right now I have overscroll selected, by the way. This is not on by default, but I prefer it. Let me show you why that happens. If you press Control-K on Windows, Command-K on the Mac, you bring up the Preferences window. And then under Tools, you have this option called Overscroll. It's off by default. So that means that the canvas doesn't move anywhere. See, I can't move the canvas. If I zoom in, you can definitely move the canvas, right? But once you see the entire image, you can't move the canvas, and that annoys me. So I like to enable the overscroll so that I can move the canvas anywhere that I want. But then sometimes you get those little accidents where you're working and then you just move everything out of the way. But anyway, overscroll is cool and I like it, so I recommend that you use it. Peter says, I love your videos. Thank you so much, Peter. I really appreciate that. So the next thing is to work on the fur, which, we can spend a lot of time using different techniques to bring the fur back. We can use something like select and mask, and then use the refine brush here to try to get better hair. And, you can see how this is working. But then when we press OK, we get that weird edge that doesn't look that good. So that's not the way to go. So I figured that one of the best ways of bringing fur back is to just paint it in. And if you don't have a fur brush, don't worry about it. We're going to make one right now. So I'm going to open up a new document, and I'm going to do 1080 by 1920. The size is probably more than big enough. You can go smaller if you want. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the curvature pen tool once again. I'm going to click on top, click on the bottom, click on the top again, then drag out from the center like so. And this is going to be my fur. So right about there. That looks pretty good. Just basically one strand of hair. And when you right click on this, you can fill this path, and I'm going to fill it with black. So we're going to create a brush. So when you're creating a brush, white will become transparent and black will become the brush itself. Almost like the opposite of a mask. With a mask, white reveals, black conceals. Well, when you're creating something for a brush, black is the ink, quote unquote. White is the paper, which is transparent, not really there. So anything that is white here will disappear, and then anything that is black will become our brush. So now I can go into Edit and choose Define Brush Preset. I can just call this Adobe Live Fur or Hair or Strand. How about this? Hair Strand. Hair Strand, if I can spell. Okay, cool. So then that gives us this amazing hair strand. And I'm going to come back to this document because we have more room to work with. And I'm going to create a new layer, fill it with white, just so that you can see how this works. So now that we've made that brush, you can see the preview here. I'm going to paint. And that definitely does not look like fur, not at all. So what we can do is click on this icon, to open up the brush settings. From the brush settings, we have all these different options that control how this brush looks. For example, the brush tip increases the spacing. See that? We can increase or decrease the spacing. You can see the preview window here. Keep an eye on that when you're making adjustments to the brush tip. Then the really important one for this example is the shape dynamics. When I click on that, I'm going to increase the size jitter. Now, when I paint, all the different hair strands are different sizes, and that's what I want. And that might be a little too much, and that's better. They all need to be about the same size. Let me just remove that. And then we need to adjust the angle jitter so that they rotate and there are different angles, and they're all not exactly the same angle. See that? That creates the fur effect there. And that's what I really want. You see this, the top? I'm really looking at the top here because that's going to become the edge of my mask. So I can just paint, I'm going to paint the mask in like so and just keep the edges. So as long as the edges look good, I'm happy. I think I need to increase the size jitter just a little more. And maybe we'll add a little bit of scattering. So I'm going to scatter it a bit. And I'm going to add a few more by increasing the count. And this is now my result. And I think that's going to make some good fur. What do you guys think? Let me see if there's any questions. Marsha said, sorry, I'm late. No worries, Marsha. Marsha, thank you for joining us. But we're making a brush here. What are you up to? Cool. So this is going to be my brush. See, so now I have something that looks like fur. That looks pretty good. And by the way, one of the reasons why I use such a large document is now I have this giant brush, right? But then I don't need a brush that's that big, and my brush needs to be a lot smaller, but that's okay because I have this brush that can work on documents that are really large or documents that are small. So when you're making a brush, try to make it as large as you can in maintaining the proper resolution and sharpness and all that. And then that way you can always reduce it smaller if you want, but it's much more difficult to go from small to large and still look good. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reduce my brush size. And one thing I need to do here is I need to go back into the brush settings. Under shape dynamics angle, I'm also going to change it to direction. That way, when I paint, it follows the direction that I go on. So for example, oops, I'm painting on the wrong layer here. Here we go. See how the edges stay? See how I'm going in a circle here, but the edges are always pointing out. If I had that disabled, it will be very different. So if I had disabled the direction set to off or the control set to off, see the difference? The edges are not always pointing out. So by having the angle control set to direction, the edges will always point out. So now I can come into my mask here and I can zoom in and I can paint. Oops, I don't want to paint the layer. I want to paint in the mask and I want to paint with white. And it's not going to work at first. It's trial and error. See how the fur, it looks pretty good, but it's too big, right? So what I'm going to do now is just decrease the size, then try again. And that might be a little too small. So I can increase the brush size and then try again. And we'll say that this is good just for the sake of time. I got a lot to show you guys. But you see how doing fur like this will give me much better results than not. One issue that I just saw is that when I'm painting the fur in, I'm getting a lot of that background and I don't like it. I want to get just the color of his fur. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to show you guys a trick. I'm going to double click on the hand tool here. Then I'll select the lasso tool and I'll make a selection around his head like so. And actually I got to make sure that I don't get the car because the car is also part of the mask. So just his fur. So now that the selection is active around his fur, I'm going to go into filter, other, and minimum. Make sure that you're on the layer mask. The focus, the white outline needs to be on the mask. And now I can push the pixels in. That's what the minimum filter does. It contracts a mask. So watch here. If I go to 73, see how deep that mask goes? I don't want it to go that deep. Maybe, I don't know, 2 pixels. Actually, more than that. Like, now 24 might be too much. We'll try 5 and see what happens. Still might not be enough. We'll go heavy-handed. We'll go 8. Then I'll press OK. So now the mask has contracted a lot more than it originally was. You can see the difference here. This is where we were earlier. We were here, and now we pushed it in. So that's what we did. We pushed the mask in. But that allows us to now paint on here, and it gives us more freedom to, paint with the brush now because we won't get the background. And I'm just going to Continue painting like so. And this could definitely take some time. I'm not using my Wacom tablet, by the way, even though I have it right here. It'll be easier with a tablet, but for some reason, I think I've mentioned this many times before on streams, I don't like to teach with a tablet. I don't know why. I just prefer the mouse when I'm teaching. Anyway, so, you can just spend some time, fixing these edges like so. The point is that when you're done, you should get something that looks much more realistic up against the background. But if you remember, the fur also had a little bit of blurriness to it. So we need to add that in. And it looks like I could definitely add more fur on this side. So we would need to add some of the blurriness. And the way that you would do that is after you paint the fur in, you can simply enable the blur tool, and then you can blur those edges. And then that's going to look much more realistic than any mask you can create. So painting edges is definitely the way to go on most masking. Not all of it, but a lot of it. Question: I want to replace the background behind a bride with a veil. Excuse me. Sorry, the text is too far away. With a veil. Should I use blend diff to allow a new background to show through the veil? So the short answer to that question is it depends. It depends on what the veil was shot up against. So if the veil, I'm assuming it's white, since you're talking about a bride, it would be white, the veil, and then whatever's behind it, if it's also dark, if it's dark, excuse me, then blend diff could possibly work, but it just really depends. And if it was shot up against like a busy background, that's going to be very difficult, but you can try blend diff. Cool. Let's see. Peter, this is a step I always forget about. The blurring step, I'm assuming you're talking about, Peter, but yeah. Cool. So obviously I'm not going to finish the dog because I got so much to cover, but it's doing the same thing. Just keep painting with the brush. In some cases, you might need to come in here and readjust the brush, maybe make it lighter, larger, maybe adjust the angle, whatever you need. But this is basically the technique, and just go around the entire dog, and hopefully you'll get some pretty cool edges. Let's move on to the next. You know what? Rick was talking about blend diff. Maybe we'll do something with blend diff. All right, I'm going to show you guys like some advanced stuff here. So we'll start with blend diff, just so that everybody knows what we are talking about when I say blend diff. So blend diff allows you to show or hide pixels based on the brightness of a layer. So we have this gradient here going from white in a circle to black. So if I double click on the side of the layer or click on the FX icon and go into blending options, I'll end up in the same spot, which is the layer style window. From here, under the blend diff options, we can select the current layer or everything below. What does that mean? Well, current layer means the layer that is currently highlighted. So the currently highlighted layer is the angle gradient, which is the circle. And we have a black point and we have a white point. So I can click and drag this white point to the right, and notice how those pixels start disappearing. Notice the gradient here under current layer. This gradient is going from black to white, and we were dragging on the black point. What this means is that now any shade of pixel that is this shade of gray or darker will become invisible. And anything that is 104, the shade of gray directly next to it, or brighter, it still remains visible. By the way, these numbers are the levels of brightness in RGB. So 0 to 255, there are 256 levels of different values that you can add. And just as a side note, I'm going to open up just, I don't want to open that. I want to open up a color overlay. That would work. When you open up the color overlay, you can see the values here. See how it says 255? And if I start going down to black, the values decrease, and then you get all the way to 0. So that's what those values mean. So 255 is white, 0 is black. See that right here? So going back into the blending options, this value 103 is that shade of gray. So anything that is this value or darker becomes invisible. And the further right I drag the slider, then the more pixels become invisible. If I drag the white point, the opposite happens. Now, any pixel that is this shade of gray, 87 or brighter, will become invisible. And anything darker than that will remain visible. Also, you can create smooth transitions. Right now we have a sharp edge, but if you hold Alt and Windows Option in the Mac and click and split these guys in half, now you create a smooth transition. So anything between 255, which is white, up to 62, which is this shade of gray, will remain completely invisible. And anything that is 62 to, or 163 to 62 will have a gradual transition between visible and invisible. And then anything after 62 or darker than 62, which is this shade of gray, will be completely invisible. So that's basically how this works. The underlying layer just brings pixels up. So if I drag the black point slider, notice how the circle will start disappearing because now these darker pixels are just pushing up. So I can do that. I think it makes more sense if I do it on the white point here. So I'm going to drag the white point to the left. So notice how those pixels come up. So underlying layer brings those pixels that you choose up. Current layer hides the pixels that you select. And of course, you can hold Alt on Windows, Option in the Mac and click and split these guys in half. So that's how this works. Why is this beneficial? Well, you can do all sorts of things with it. For example, on this clouds layer, I can double click to the side of it to bring up the blend this options. And I could say, you know what? I want the clouds to appear like they're in front of this text. Well, what color are the clouds? White. Great. I can now use the white point slider and drag this to the left, and it looks like the clouds are over it. But that looks too sharp. How do I soften it? Once again, Alt on Windows, Option on a Mac, click, split it in half, creates a smooth transition. And now it looks like the clouds are over the text. The cool thing about that is that everything is editable, right? So now I can move this around and it looks like it's part of, behind these other clouds. Pretty cool stuff. And of course, you can keep manipulating it as much as you want. And another cool thing that you can do is work with color. This is, I'm not going to spend too much time because the example I'm going to show you really doesn't relate to color, but I wanted to just bring it up. So blend diff also has the options to work with the channels, the red channel, green channel, and blue channel. What does that mean? If I select the red channel and drag the black point, wait, why does that part disappear? If I drag the white point, why does this part disappear on the red channel? Well, if you go into the channels panel, you'll see the red channel here. And look at that. White's on top, black's on the bottom. Why is that? When you select a channel, in this case red, the color of the channel that you select will be white. So we selected the red channel, so the red part is white. The opposite of red in RGB is cyan, so that will be black. This is what that channel indicates. If we go into the green channel, well, the color of the channel is green, so then that means this is white. The opposite of green is magenta. That means that this will be black. And there you go. That's what happens. With blue, blue is here. The opposite of blue is yellow. So then that will be black and this will be white. And sure enough, that is the case. So when I go into the blend diff options and I select any one of these drop downs, for example, red, I can drag this one to the left and look, the top part disappears because this is the white point. If you remember in the channel, the white point was the white pixels were on top because that's the color of the channel. And with this one, the bottom part disappears because this is the black part on that channel. The opposite of red is cyan. And you have the same options of splitting these in half by holding Alt or Option. Anyway, just wanted to point that out in case you were curious, but the example is not really gonna show that. Even though, you know what, never mind. I have an example. Why not? We're having fun. So we have this background here, and I want to change the sky. If I go into this photo, I can go into the channels panel. And if you look at the blue channel, you'll notice that the sky is essentially white. The sky is blue, right? It's essentially white, and everything else is pretty much, black or really dark. So we can use that to blend the channels together. So with this layer, I can double click to the side of the layer here, choose the blue channel, and under the current layer, I can just hide the white pixels, which are the blue pixels. See that? And I want a smooth transition. I'll click on it by holding Alt, split this in half, and now I have a really cool background replacement. I'll select the sky there on the bottom, and there you go. Look at that. The leaves and the branches and all that remain pretty accurate. See that? Pretty cool stuff. Anyway, so that's one way that you can use the blend diff. So how are we going to use blend diff in this session, class, stream, whatever you guys want to call it? Well, this is called advanced Photoshop techniques you should know. So this is going to be pretty advanced. So I hope you guys understand it. And if there's any questions, please leave them in the chat. Before I show this example, I'm going to answer one of the questions. What if you have two layers with different colors? The layer that you select, Robert, is the layer that the blend diff will control under this layer section. So it really doesn't matter what the other layers have. If you select the underlying layer sliders, it will look at the composite view. So basically what you can see to push those pixels forward. And if there's more than one color in a single layer, what you saw on screen is what will happen. Cool. Let's see. Awesome. So Sean is saying Russell, and I'm guessing you're referring to this, Sean, because I showed this photo in the Russell Brown session at Adobe Max, but I don't think I showed this example because, yeah, I'm 99% sure I didn't show this example at Adobe Max because I thought, oh man, this might be too advanced, but whatever, we'll work with it. This is not Russell, though. This is not Russell Brown. I showed the photo at Russell Brown's session, but this is not Russell Brown. So if I have this piece of texture and I want to make it, give it a distressed look, make it seem like it's grungy and it has cracks and all that good stuff, how can I do that? Well, of course, I can create a layer mask, right? If you click on the layer mask icon, you'll, of course, create a layer mask. And I can paint on the layer mask, of course, to, distort it with black, but doing it by hand will be too difficult. So why don't we go into my libraries panel and type the word grunge, because I know I got some cool grunge textures here. So I can, maybe select this grunge texture, and that looks pretty cool. So can I take this texture and I'll copy it? And one way of copying, by the way, is holding Control, clicking on the layer thumbnail, and then copying, Control-C. Can I copy those pixels, which I just did, and paste them onto the layer mask? Well, if I select the layer mask and hit paste, it just creates a new layer. The workaround is to hold Alt and Windows option on the Mac and click, and then paste and place that into position, and then hold Alt and Windows option on the Mac again and click, and there it is. So now I have this weather look. Pretty cool. You know what might be cool? What if we had some like scratches and cracks and all that good stuff? So I think I have something with cracks here. Let's try this one. That might be too much, but I'll bring this other one just in case. Yeah, we'll do the thin one first. So I want to add those cracks to that layer mask. What can I do? Well, I can do the same thing. I can place the layer first just to make it easier now when I paste, and then hold Control, click on the layer thumbnail, and then copy, Control-C, and then I can go into my layer mask. Remember, I can hold Alt and Windows option on the Mac and click, and then I can paste. Oh, by the way, you see how it pasted in the middle, not where I wanted it to? The reason is if you press Control-V, Photoshop will paste in the middle, but if you press Control-Shift-V, Photoshop will paste in place. So paste is Control-V, and paste in place is Shift Control V. It'll just paste in the same location that you copied it from. But anyway, when I do that, notice that we lose the initial grunge. Like what? Why do we lose the initial grunge? Because we pasted pixels over it. But we can actually blend in a mask. We can go into Edit, Fade, and we can change this to Multiply. And look at that. So now I have the darker cracked pixels on top of the original grunge. So you can actually blend, you can use blending modes, so to speak, in a mask. So I'll press OK, and then I'll deselect, and I'll come in, and now you can see that grunge texture with the cracks. Pretty cool, right? Viola said didn't know that for Photoshop. Let me know in the chat who knew this or didn't. Let me see if there's any questions. I took Russell's Atom many years ago. Epic. Yeah, I've only done one Atom, which was when was it? Last year? I think I did it. Yeah, last year in Monterey. I spoke for Russell for that conference. And yeah, Russell Brown sessions are my favorite at Max. Anyway, so cool. So we have these cracks here and everything looks fantastic. But what if somebody comes and tells you, hey, you know what? I don't like the placement of these cracks. Can you move them around? That's going to be very difficult because now we're in just one layer, right? Like there's nothing I can do to move these cracks around. I would have to like redo this whole process again. And that is extremely, extremely annoying. So what do we do? How can we create the same effect, create transparency, and have the flexibility to move things around? Well, what I can do is use blend diff to kind of create a mask, like fake it. And what does that mean? Well, if I double click to the side of the layer here, I can add blend diff right to the current layer into everything below. So if I hold Alt and Windows Option in the Mac and click and split this in half, I basically create a blend diff that goes from 0 to 225. It gradually disappears, right? So if I create this layer and clip it to the layer below, look at what happens. It makes the black areas transparent. See that crack? So they're transparent, but we keep the white, which I don't want that. Well, with the blending mode, we can hide white and keep black. So I'll make it, I'll turn this into multiply. So the white disappears, the black remains, but the black is used as a blend diff, as a mask. So then these pixels become transparent. And then I have the grunge, same thing. Flip it to the layer below and change the blending mode to multiply. Oops, that layer, change the blending mode to multiply. So now I have the grunge and the cracks on the same layer here. And I just got to make sure that they cover the entire text. There we go. Just drag them down. And now I can control. So now I can control everything. If somebody says, hey, move the cracks around, I can definitely move the cracks around. If somebody says, hey, make them larger, I can make them larger. And this is all real transparency. So what we're doing here is we are tricking Photoshop into creating a mask by using blend diff. Remember, I split the blend diff in half. So now I have a blend diff that starts at 0 and it gradually becomes more visible as we get to white. That's basically what a mask does, right? Anything that is black will be invisible, and then you have a gradual transition till you get to white. And to be frank with you, I probably wouldn't push it all the way to white. Maybe I'll keep it at like 252 and then just, make everything that's like really dark invisible, like so. And then you can adjust accordingly. Also, the brightness of these layers is what's controlling what becomes the mask. So I can always go into image adjustment levels, and I can now control, how those pixels disappear. And the advantage of doing it this way is that you have total control, right? Because somebody can now say, hey, you know what? I want more of those cracks. Well, you can duplicate the layer, and now you have more of those cracks, and you don't have to worry about redoing the whole mask. You can place that here. You can move it anywhere you want, and you can just have total control of the image. What happens when somebody says, hey, let's bring in like a logo or something? So let's bring in a logo. So I'm going to go into my shapes panel here. By the way, I'm not really sure why, but Adobe in their infinite wisdom decided to hide all the shapes. We only have these groups now. If you want to bring back all the shapes, you can click on the flyout menu and choose legacy shapes and more. And now you have a ton more of shapes that you can use. For some reason, they're all hidden. No idea why, but they're there. So now we can have something like, I don't know, like a horse or something, or I guess we'll do a horse. I'll put the horse here, and that is the logo for this, movie or whatever we're working on. We'll just put the horse here, and we'll make them, similar yellow. I know it's not going to be the same, but whatever, similar yellow. But I want the horse to have that same distress look. What do we do? Well, I'm going to, just so that things are not too confusing, I'm going to delete that layer, and I'm going to hide these, and that brings that text back. And actually, now that text is back, I'm going to make it the same yellow. Oh, not liking it. So let me do it the hard way. I'm going to copy the, what is that called? The Why can't I remember the name? The H reference, whatever they're called. Doesn't matter. So now I have the horse here, right? Same color. And I want all that distress look to appear on the horse. Well, it's not going to work with just one layer, so I need a group. So I'm going to put these two into a group, Control G, Command G, and these need to be outside of the group. So I'm going to drag them out like so. And let's just work with the group for now. So we have the group. And inside the group, we have this new West text, and we have the horse, and then we have these blending options. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to copy the layer style, and I'll paste the layer style here, and then I'll clear this layer style. So now the blend if, when I open this up, is on the group. See that? There it is. My blend if is now on the group. So I can do exactly the same thing now. Press Control Alt G after selecting all layers. And then when I enable it, now everything inside of that group has that distress look. See that? Pretty cool stuff. And you can always use the group blend if to adjust it accordingly. So you can decide how bright, how dark, how much the layers above affect that group. And you can start bringing in more images. Like we talked about this one with deeper cracks earlier. I can bring that in, clip it to the layer below, change the blending mode to multiply. And now I have this other layer that has, you know, more cracks. And the cool thing about this technique is that you can apply layer masks to these layers that are quote unquote masks. So for example, on this one, I can apply a layer mask and then select a brush, like, I don't know, like one of the default brushes I think will be good. Like this hard round one. Whoops, sorry about that. And now I can, you know, maybe paint away the cracks from the W because the W is looking a little weak. So I can still add more cracks, keep the W in there. Also, it looks like this texture is really affecting that W. So I can maybe select the soft brush and, you know, paint, oops, not with black, with white, paint white on here. Sorry about that. Oh, it's not a regular layer. That's why. Rasterized layer. Sorry. So now this is a regular layer. And if I paint with white, it brings back the detail on there. See that? Just because it was too strong. And if I'm too heavy-handed, if I just paint and I'm too heavy-handed, I can always go back into Edit, Fade Brush Tool, and I can fade my last adjustment so that it works accordingly. But the cool thing about this is that this is all transparency, right? So you can imagine that if I'm working, I'm going to put it all into a group, by the way. You can imagine if I'm working like in a movie or something, I can keep everything editable, and I can, you know, switch this guy out for like another character in the movie, and it'll remain transparent. I know I have another cowboy in here. So I have, I think I have this guy here. Yep, there you go. So I have this guy here. Obviously the text is not going to work just because it's a different color, but I could always probably colorize it. And there you go. I can colorize it now, make it black or whatever color, and then it should work. But in this case, I'm not going to worry about that. It was just an example to show you what you can do. Let me see if there's any questions. Cool. Cool. Let's see. No questions, but thank you so much for the comments, everybody. I'm glad Viola's saying I'm just gonna randomly use blend if today until I figure out. I think you should. It's really one of the best tools in Photoshop. Been using it for 20 years, so it's a great tool. Cool. Lisa is the sweetest. I agree with that. How much time do I have? Oh, cool. I still got plenty of time. All right, cool. I think this is all I wanted to show you guys on this blend if option. Let me move on to the next one. Next example. Let's talk about, okay, cool. So, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this already. Like we've been talking about it for like months now, the generative expand. When you choose generative expand from the drop-down here under the fill menu and the options bar, you can change the aspect ratio of an image by, you know, cropping out, right? So we can crop out like so. So we're going to take that vertical image and make it into horizontal by just using the crop tool, expanding out, right? I'm sure most of you probably already knew that. Peter is asking, who is Lisa? Lisa Carney, one of my very, very dear friends. I'm sure that you might not know Lisa, but you might know her work. I'm going to give her a little plug here. lisacarney.com, I think, is her website. This is Lisa Carney. She's like a Photoshop master. And like I said, I'm sure you know her work because she works with movies and TV. Actually, I worked on this poster with her. I helped her create all the different elements. I created the tree stump there, this weird thing, worked on the reef, and worked a lot of pieces for this project with her. But anyway, so this is Lisa, and you can check out her work. I actually work with this project with Lisa as well. She did Venom, she did The Boys, she's done a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm sure you have seen her work. Make sure you check her out. She's been on Adobe Live before. You can check out some of her streams. So hopefully Lisa can come back to Adobe Live soon. But yeah, anyway, that's Lisa. Look her up. And anyway, so after you expand using the crop tool, you get really good results. Obviously, I think it works fantastic. I think most of you have seen that. The cool thing about this feature is that it also works on illustrations, right? So Photoshop looks at the content and you can expand out like so. And it's going. And what Photoshop does is it just looks at the image and tries to figure out what should be on those transparent areas. And, it does a really good job. You can click on the variations and it looks fantastic. And I think most of you probably knew that. But what we were doing now is going from vertical to horizontal. What if you want to go from horizontal to vertical? How can we use GenAI to help us with that? Cool. Well, let me see. I was reading the comments here. Cool. Amazing. All right. So how can we make this into like a vertical image, right? It's like, how can we turn that into this so that we have everything in the scene? Well, what you can do is, let me undo this for now because I need the full widescreen version. What you can do is just make a selection of the two important things in this image, which are the Eiffel Tower and the lady sitting there. And I'm going to place her on a new layer. Control-Shift-J on Windows, Command-Shift-J on the Mac to place that layer into another layer. By the way, it's got a hole there, and that's because this is a background layer. So before doing that, what you need to do is click on the lock icon to unlock it, and then press Control-Shift-J, and it will now be transparency. The reason it became black is because black is currently my foreground color, but whatever color was in the background, that's what it would have become if I hadn't unlocked the layer. Anyway, so now that I have this in its new layer, I can now crop it, make it into like an Instagram story or whatever I'm trying to make. So there you go. I want her there, and I can now use the move tool to bring the Eiffel Tower in. And, like, we'll just say that she's like really close to it, just, watching the scenery. There it is. It looks great. But we obviously have these edges. And sure, I can use layer mask and blend it all in, and that'll work 100%. But I can use blend if instead. So now I can come in here and get as much as I can out of the sky and out of all these different things. And then right here, I need to generate some of those bricks. And you know what? I don't like these clouds, so I want to get rid of them. And there we go. Let me see. Is there anything else I need to select? I'm going to keep a lot of this original brick here because that's pretty good. But then I'm going to let Photoshop figure out the rest. There we go. I think that'll work. I'll press the, you know what? I'm going to get that off of that selection. Then I'm with Photoshop. You can just leave the prompt blank. You don't need to type anything in. Just click generate, and Photoshop should blend these two layers together. And there we go. Everything looks fantastic. Super, super cool. Really cool. Somebody made a comment about dueling. I remember Adobe like 6 years ago had Lisa on with two people, which I'm not gonna name, and Lisa destroyed them on a Photoshop battle. And that's because Lisa, has been a working professional since the early 90s at a very, very high level. And it it's just like not fair when you get somebody who's it's almost like having somebody who plays like in the NBA or something, and then you go play pickup basketball. It's just not fair. So that wouldn't be good for other people dueling Lisa. I wouldn't want to duel her. Actually, you know what? I'm willing to admit, we were at dinner and I was very convinced about something, and Lisa said no, and we put money on it, and I was wrong. So yeah, I wouldn't want to see people get destroyed by Lisa, and I've seen it. So yeah, and then yeah, you're right, Marcia. She works so fast. Again, being a professional since the early '90s and only working in like high level stuff, really, really increases your Photoshop's chops. Anyway, so this is how you would combine two images together, or in other words, make like a portrait or a landscape photo into a portrait photo and keep all the main subjects in the same frame rather than like stretching it or doing something else. And like I said, you could have used masking, but this is just a lot faster. Cool. We got about 10 minutes or so. Um, let's see. Oh, and the other thing you can do with this feature is that Photoshop can open up videos, right? You can open up an MP4 and it comes up. Um, Somebody, Sean said, like a battle between Frank and he'd smash me. I actually done. I've never battled Lisa in a Photoshop challenge, but sometimes in conferences they have. They used to do that a lot in Photoshop World, and the one that I did was at Creative Live, and I've never lost a battle, but I haven't battled Lisa yet, so we'll see. But like I don't have the experience that Lisa has. Lisa has been a professional since the early '90s, me since the early 2000s, so I don't know, but we'll see. Anyway, um, so with Photoshop can open up videos, right? So this is an MP4, and when I play it, you'll see that is this video of this cattle going through. It looks all right, but we can definitely make it even more fun by turning it into widescreen. So with the crop tool, you can click on the double-sided arrow here under fill, make sure you have generative expand, and you can come out like so. And I have that overscroll thing I was talking about. That's why my screen went down, and I can now generate. Um, and no, why is it telling me this? This shouldn't happen. I've done this demo before and it doesn't violate the guidelines. We'll try it one more time. We'll see what happens. And if it violates the guidelines, I'll show you guys a trick that hopefully can work. But I don't know why this would violate the guidelines. It's just cattle. But who knows? Maybe Firefly thought this was something else. There we go. So why didn't this work? Well, we're talking about video now. So we have a video timeline. And if you look at the video timeline, we have the video here and the generation here on the left, which is also here in the layers panel. So what you can do is just drag it out of the group. So now it's in a new layer and I can drag it to the beginning. And now I can choose the variation that better works for this image. So we'll say that that one's the best one. When I hit play, you can now see that we have a widescreen version of this video. Super cool, right? But now we can decorate the set. Now I can use the rectangular marquee tool, make a selection on top, and then just, type something in here. We can do something like distant mountains with a dramatic cloudy sky. And we'll see what that gives us. And by the way, when you're watching this, look at the tips that Photoshop gives you. They can help you with your generations. And look at that. We have now this really cool background. I don't know, which one do you guys like best? I think, I don't know, it's between these two. We'll just go with that one. And this time it generated this new piece right outside of it. So when I hit play, we have this super cool video now, because originally we were working with just these two layers, which is pretty boring. Then using generative AI, we expanded this. And now we can start getting really creative and fancy if we want. So I can come in here and, I'm just going to type the word, I don't know, what do you guys think? Like a barn or something? So I'm just going to, barn. There we go. Click on generate. We'll see what kind of barn we get. Okay, good question, Viola. I'll answer that in just a second. There you go. We have some really cool looking barns. And now when I hit play, you should be able to see that we have a video with a cool background, a barn, everything else. Fantastic. The only thing, of course, is that Photoshop cannot motion track. So any footage that you bring in needs to be stable. Otherwise, it'll be obvious that it's not a real video. And also things can be coming in and out of frame, because obviously they wouldn't go into the generated areas. But as long as you have stable footage, you can do some really cool stuff. So now your question, Viola, where are you? What was your question? Oh, it's about sky replacement, right? So if you can do so can you use generative fill for sky replacement? The short answer is yeah. The longer answer is I probably wouldn't use it for sky replacement. I will use it to generate a completely new sky, like in this case, but a sky replacement, probably not. And let me show you really quickly why. I know I have something in here about, oh, by the way, did I do that? Oh, it was at Adobe Max. At Adobe Max, let me see. Sky replacement. Here you go. So the reason that I wouldn't do that is that, for example, I can select, if you go into select sky, I'll make a selection out of the sky, right? Now under generative fill, I can type in dramatic sky, right? And it'll give me a dramatic sky, but there's going to be some issues, and you'll see what they are in just a moment. CJ, I don't believe the generations are larger than they were when they were in beta. I believe it's still using the first version of Firefly. But anyway, here we go. So this is the generation that it gave me. And sure, we have a dramatic sky, but look, the tree now has leaves in some instances. And then there's this new trees here on the side. There's our mountain. So it's not really doing a sky replacement. It's just generating a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't like. So I wouldn't use the generative fill for a sky replacement. I would use the old school edit sky replacement feature, because it gives you really good results, editable layers, and it doesn't add any extra content you don't want. And you can select the skies that you like the best. If you don't like any of the skies that are in here, you can go into Get More Skies and import your own, or download free skies. And to download a free sky, it'll take you onto this page where you will see some skies that you can download from professionals, including sunset, spectacular skies, sunset, night skies, blue skies, storms. And these are the artists who created these skies, including Russell Brown from Adobe that we were just speaking about earlier. And you can just download more if you want. And, you have all these different controls to adjust the foreground, the background, all this other stuff, just to make your sky replacement more realistic. But like I said, best of all, you get, regular Photoshop layers. So you get a regular Photoshop layer and you can adjust it anywhere you want without any of that extra stuff. So I wouldn't use generative fill for that. By the way, I just was reminded, since I was talking about it, but let me open up a page here that I want to show you guys in case you want to learn more. And I am having trouble finding it. I apologize. Here we go. So in the chat, in the Behance chat, I'm going to paste this link. And that link will take you to the Photoshop Summit. and the Photoshop Summit is going on this week. It's free to watch live. My session is actually today. I'm doing an advanced session in Photoshop, covering different things than what I talked about today. But these are all the instructors. You probably know Erin Nays. We were talking about Lisa Carney. She's in here. There she is. Colin Smith. A bunch of really good people. Photoshop master Brent Monroy, in my opinion, the best Photoshop user ever. So everybody's going to be there this week. So the link is in the chat there on Behance. It's free this week to watch. Later on, if you want to watch the recordings, that's paid, but I would watch for free this whole week. Cool. And that puts me at time. Thank you guys so much. I really hope that you enjoy this session, that you learned a lot. Thank you so much, Marsha. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and stay tuned for more Adobe Live. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.